Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at quite a story. It's about a journey from, well, the heights of the corporate world to the grassroots of global education.
That's right. We're focusing on John Wood, who many will know was a pretty high-flying executive at Microsoft. And we're using his book, Leaving Microsoft to Change the World, as our main guide here.
Right. And our mission, really, is to get under the skin of that massive career shift he made. How did he go from tech giant to founding Room to Read?
Exactly. Room to Read, which, focuses on literacy and gender equality in education globally. It's a huge undertaking.
Huge. And Wood wasn't just a one-hit wonder, was he? He's got this background of philanthropy, entrepreneurship. He's a writer. He even founded another nonprofit, Room to Grow.
He did. So we're going to unpack, I think we've got about 8 key ideas from the book that really capture his experience.
Okay. And it all kicks off with a trip, doesn't it? A trip that sort of changed everything for him.
Indeed. It starts in Nepal. That's the catalyst. He went there, saw the reality of education in some really poor rural communities, and, well, that sight basically set him on a completely new path.
Okay, let's really dive into that Nepal experience then. What exactly did he encounter?
Well, he visited some schools, and the conditions were pretty stark. Very few resources, almost no books to speak of. It wasn't just a small shortage, it was a real, profound lack of reading materials.
Wow. And we should probably paint a picture of the context, right? Nepal's literacy rate back then was hovering around 30%. Just think about that number for a second.
It's incredibly low, and what's really striking is how much this affected Wood personally. It wasn't just like an observation he made and moved on. It felt like a call to action for him.
So he felt he had to do something.
Yeah, pretty much immediately. He made a promise, quite a simple one actually, to a headmaster at one of the schools. He said, "I'll send you some books."
A simple promise, but one that clearly snowballed.
It really did, because when he got back home, he told people what he'd seen, what he'd promised. He reached out to his network, friends, colleagues.
And the response?
It was, frankly, amazing. People started sending books. He ended up with around 3,000 books to send back to that school in Nepal.
3,000 from just asking around.
Yep. Imagine the impact of that first shipment arriving. It just shows, the power of connecting a need with people who can help, even in a small way initially.
It wasn't just about the books then. It was about showing someone cared.
I think so. It was like planting a seed, showing belief in those kids, those communities.
And you can imagine the satisfaction he must have felt from just making that happen.
Oh, absolutely. And that feeling, that deep satisfaction, seems to have been the real driver for what came next. He actually went back to Nepal a second time.
Really?
And after that second trip, he made the huge decision. He decided to leave Microsoft for good.
Wow. Just like that.
Yeah.
Leaving a top job.
To dedicate himself completely to this education cause. I mean, that's a massive leap of faith. It suggests a real fundamental shift in what he valued, what he considered, a successful life.
He found something more compelling than corporate success.
Seems that way. And to make it work, he made a strategic move too. He relocated to San Francisco.
Why San Francisco?
To be closer to Silicon Valley, essentially. Closer to potential donors, to the kind of network he thought he'd need to build this thing.
Right, tapping into that tech, wealth, and philanthropy scene.
Exactly. But the book does mention, and it's important, that this commitment wasn't without personal sacrifice. His relationship at the time ended partly due to this all-consuming new direction.
That really underscores the level of commitment.
Which brings us to a really practical point. Funding. Starting a nonprofit is one thing, keeping it going is another. How did he tackle securing funding?
Yeah, that's always the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the multi-million-dollar question for Room to Read eventually. Wood had to figure out how to translate his passion into, well, actual donations. So how did he approach potential donors? What worked?
He developed what seemed like 5 core principles based on his experience. First off, connecting personally, making donors feel like they were part of the story, not just writing a check.
Okay, that personal touch. What else?
Second, showing tangible impact, proving that the money was actually making a difference. Real results, real stories.
Numbers and narratives. Got it.
Third, keeping overhead low. Donors always want to know their money is going to the cause, not just administration. He was very focused on efficiency.
That's always reassuring for donors, isn't it?
Definitely. Fourth was personal passion. His own belief and enthusiasm had to shine through. It's infectious, right?
It absolutely can be. And the last one.
And fifth, demonstrating meaningful impact. So not just any impact, but showing how the donations were genuinely changing lives in significant ways. using compelling stories, but backed by solid data, too.
Okay, so connect, show impact, be efficient, be passionate, and prove it matters. Yeah, seems like a solid formula.
It clearly worked for them. And with that sort of framework, Room to Read started to think beyond Nepal. Vietnam came next.
Vietnam. What prompted the move there? Was it a deliberate strategy or?
It seems like it was sparked by a couple of key things, maybe slightly serendipitous. Wood was actually on a Microsoft business trip, and he met this incredibly bright 17-year-old Vietnamese boy named Vu.
Okay.
And Vu was just passionate about computers, about connecting with the world. That conversation really stuck with Wood, planted a seed about maybe doing something in Vietnam.
Interesting how one encounter can do that.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And then, not long after, he connected with a woman named Erin.
Aaron.
Yeah. Erin had really strong personal ties to Vietnam and heard about what Wood was doing. She basically reached out and said, "How can I help?" Initially, she just volunteered her time and expertise to get things started there.
Wow, another key person stepping up.
Exactly. And her work was so effective, her dedication so clear, that she was brought on full-time pretty quickly. She became absolutely crucial to establishing Room to Read in Vietnam.
So it sounds like that early growth was really about finding these passionate key individuals.
Very much so. Inspiring people and strategic connections driving it forward.
Now, going from Microsoft, this huge structured corporation, to a nonprofit startup, that's a culture shock, I imagine. What skills or lessons from Microsoft did he actually bring across? Did that corporate background help?
That's a great question. And yes, it seems his Microsoft experience was actually a huge asset, not something he just left behind. He brought at least 4 really important lessons, according to the book.
Okay, what were they?
First, a relentless focus on results, tangible results. Microsoft is obviously very results-driven, and he applied that same thinking, set clear goals, measure everything, track progress rigorously.
Right. No room for just hoping things work out. You need the data.
Precisely. Second, respect for employees. He knew from Microsoft how crucial it is to value your team, recognize their contributions. A motivated team is vital, whether you're selling software or building libraries.
Makes sense. Treat people well. What else?
Third, being data-driven. This ties into the results focus, but it's about using information, using analysis to make decisions. Where should we build next? Is this program working? Let the data help guide you.
So not just gut feelings.
Exactly. And finally, valuing loyalty. Building long-term relationships, both with the staff on the ground and with the donors and supporters. That sustained commitment is essential.
Results, respect, data, loyalty. You can see how those principles would build a really strong foundation for a nonprofit, aiming for serious impact.
Absolutely. They were key to Room to Read's effectiveness in tackling illiteracy and, frankly, in attracting the support they needed to grow.
And speaking of growth, scaling up globally must have been a massive challenge. How do you expand across different countries, different cultures, without losing your focus or, getting spread too thin?
That's a central challenge for any growing international organization. Wood's strategy wasn't about imposing a rigid model everywhere. It was focused on building strong local networks.
Local networks.
Meaning, instead of just a top-down approach from, say, San Francisco, they worked hard to create networks of local donors, engage local community leaders, find key players within each new country or region. Fundraisers were important for this, connecting with new people locally.
So empowering people on the ground.
Precisely. It relied heavily on local volunteers and dedicated local staff. The book mentions people like Pasupati in Nepal, who were absolutely vital for the day-to-day work delivering the books, overseeing school construction, building trust in the community.
Makes sense. You need that local buy-in and expertise.
Definitely. And importantly, even as they expanded, Wood made sure that the original communities in Nepal, the ones that started it all, continued to get support. It showed a long-term commitment, not just moving on to the next big thing.
That's important. Now, besides general literacy, the book talks about a specific focus that emerged. Girls' education. This led to Room to Grow, right?
Yes, Room to Grow came about because they recognized that girls often face much bigger hurdles in getting an education, especially in many of the communities they served. Female illiteracy was and is a huge issue.
So Room to Grow is specifically for girls.
It's a scholarship program. It provides the funds and support needed to keep underprivileged girls in school. Girls who might otherwise be pulled out for work or early marriage or just because the family can't afford it.
And is there a story that sort of illustrates its impact?
There's a powerful example in the book about Anita, a 15-year-old in New Delhi. Her parents were trying to marry her off, basically ending her education, but she received a room to grow scholarship, which allowed her to stay in school. It literally changed her life trajectory.
Wow. That's incredibly direct impact, and the benefits go beyond just that one girl, don't they?
Oh, hugely. This is a really critical point. Educating girls and women has massive ripple effects through the whole community. Well, better maternal health, lower infant mortality rates, improved family nutrition, better prevention of diseases like HIV/AIDS. Plus, educated women are more likely to find work, earn more, and lift their families out of poverty. It's one of the most effective development investments you can make.
It really tackles so many issues at once.
Okay.
Okay, one last major point from the book, the 2005 tsunami. That must have been a defining moment.
It was a terrible tragedy, obviously affecting millions, and for Room to Read, it seems to have been a moment that forced them to think even bigger.
How so?
Wood made a decisive shift. He committed Room to Read to not just continuing their existing work, but to actively rebuilding schools and libraries in the tsunami-affected areas in Asia. It was a massive scaling up of their ambition, really stepping into a disaster recovery role.
That's a huge undertaking, especially on top of their regular programs.
It was, and it led to a really key learning moment for Wood about, well, about asking for help, about setting ambitious goals.
What?
He managed to get an interview on CNN, a big platform, and he used it to make a direct, pretty bold appeal for support for this huge rebuilding effort.
And people responded.
The response was overwhelming, just a massive outpouring of support, donations flooding in. It really drove home a lesson for him. Don't be afraid to think big. Announce ambitious goals, even if you don't have every step figured out. Sometimes you have to ask for what you need on a grand scale.
That's a powerful lesson in leadership and maybe in believing the generosity of others when the cause is clear.
Absolutely. It really shaped their approach going forward.
So, wrapping this up, it's quite a journey we've traced. John Wood, from Microsoft executive to founder of Room to Read, and then Room to Grow, dedicating his life to tackling global illiteracy.
It's a remarkable story, and I think the core message that really resonates is that one person with a clear purpose and, let's face it, a lot of determination and skill really can make a significant difference in the world.
It definitely challenges the idea that these problems are too big for individuals to influence.
It really does. It shows how skills from one sector, like business, can be incredibly valuable when applied to solving social problems.
And for anyone listening who finds this story inspiring, who's thinking about impact in education, you might also want to look into the story of Adam Brown.
Oh, right. Pencils of promise.
Exactly. Another really compelling example of someone dedicating themselves to building schools and improving education globally. Similar spirit, different path, maybe.
Definitely worth exploring. And maybe, as a final thought to leave everyone with after this deep dive into John Wood's work,
Yeah.
considering everything we've talked about, the challenges, the strategies, the impact, what might be your own way, however small or large, to contribute to positive change? And thinking about literacy specifically, what role do you see education playing in solving some of the really complex global challenges we're all facing today?
That's a great question to ponder. What's our potential impact? And how vital is education, really? Definitely food for thought.